What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by going through each of the models I have here. As you can see, I've invested in quite a lot of different models. Actually, for this review purpose, I wanted to be able to bring you a review that compared and contrasted and gave you the best model for a certain need, in my opinion. So I'm going to go through each model, do a separate review for that model, and then at the end I'm going to give you what's the best for in the gym, what's the best for transitioning, what's the best for everyday use, all those different kind of areas. So I will list the times that you can pop to each different review. So if you specifically want to look at Komodos, you can go there. If you specifically want to look at ELXs, you can go to that time. And I may do this in a two parts. So the first part will be a review of the shoes, and the second part will be when to use them and which is best for what activity. Right, so I will say there are two lines that I wanted to incorporate, but they haven't been delivered to me yet because they're with a colleague of mine. I work in the UK in association with A to Z Fitness. They are an official stocker or stockist of official Vibram Fivefingers. If you go there to buy your Vibrams and you mention my name, Back to Prime or Alistair McGee, you will get 10% off. I waive any payment to myself. I don't get a payment because I ask them to give my referrals a bigger discount. So if you go to them, A to Z Fitness, if you mention my name, 10% off, which can't be bad at all. So, right, to start, I'm going to start with the Komodos. The Komodos are one of my favourite Vibram Fivefingers. They're an all-rounder shoe. They were kind of brought in, I suppose, to be a more tougher version, an upbeat version of the TrekSport, and probably a more upbeat version than KSO, we should say. So these were brought in for really hill trekking. I wear these a lot. If I bring them up here, as you can see there, it's quite tough. It's got quite a tough undersurface. I've hiked in these, I've trained at the gym in these, I wear them every day at work, and these are robust. I mean, I've had these probably over a year, and you can see they're still fine, and I've worn those most of the day of the year. I've actually got two pairs that I wear a lot. This is my green pair. These are a bit dirtier because these have been out a little bit more. And I've actually got a third pair there because when there's a deal on, I tend to buy cheap, so I've got backups because I know I'm going to wear them. So the Komodo, good for all-round use, good for heavy trailing, hiking, good for if you want to run with a bit more protection under your foot because, as I say, there's a bit more of a sole there. Not so good in the cold, although better than a KSO. So if you do go out in the cold in temperatures probably below about 5 degrees, 4 degrees, that's centigrade, you will need socks on underneath, otherwise you're going to get some pretty cold toes. So be aware of that. So they're good in moderate temperatures, probably going to get hot and sweaty in hot temperatures. The toughness on the top gives you a bit of protection on your toe, and the material is actually really comfortable. This is more of a mesh type material, and I actually find that one really comfortable, which is again why I wear them every day. I highly recommend the Komodo. It's an expensive one in the UK. I think in the UK it retails about £130. In America you can get them cheaper than that, obviously, so if you were going over there for a holiday, why not invest in a pair when you're out there? But also look out for offers on certain websites. Some websites out there will give you good discount if you get them on a clearance. So that's the Komodo Sport. The next one I'm going to cover, I'm going to have to scoot through these quite quick because otherwise we're going to be here forever. The next one is the Bikila. The Bikila is a good all-rounder. It's another good all-rounder, but it's lighter. So this material here isn't so much a mesh, it's softer. It's more like a mixture of like a lycra and a mesh. And as you can see with both of these, with all of these, I've got the cross strap. I will explain the difference between the cross strap and the laces, but most of my initial purchases were the cross strap. I don't find that gives me any problems. If you do it up too tight when you're running, it may cause you to get some stiffness in the middle of your foot. So don't do it up too tight. Make sure you've got a bit of movement in your foot so when your forefoot's striking, your foot can splay properly. Fantastic for in the gym. These are actually what I train in at the moment. They're good all-rounders, they're good for running. Obviously as long as you know forefoot technique. They're good for squatting, they're good for lunging, anything with twisting, so cable work. You can sprint in them. And they're light, so you're not really going to know they're on your foot that much. The Komodo's a little bit heavier, so you are aware that's on your foot. With all of these, you have the option of wearing socks inside. I don't need to, I go generally barefoot in all of these. But the Bikilas, they're cheaper. I think they retail at between £80 and £90. So if you're stuck on costing, then that's a great one to go for. Hiked in these as well, once I transitioned a little bit. Be aware that if you're hiking in these, you'll have to be very aware of where you're putting your foot, because a sharp stone, I've got to the point where I don't even feel those too much now, but there's a bit of protection here in the arch where the plantar fascia is, but not as much as you might find in some of the other shoes. So the Bikila, good shoe, good all-rounder, cheaper than some, and one that I would highly recommend for people who only can afford one pair. Right, moving on. We'll go on to the KSOs next. The KSO is one of the original Vibram Fivefingers. This is what I transitioned in, so I would wear this to work every day. I would train in it. I would wear it just out walking around. Walking was great in this. There is a grip. You can actually see if I do this. Or maybe you can't see. Yeah, there you go. You might be able to see there's a little grip in there. But it is a minimal shoe. There's very little protection in terms of around the arch. So if you're running and transitioning in these, you're going to have to take it easy and you're going to have to build up slowly, because you will feel it in your calves the first time you start forefoot striking. If you don't know how to forefoot strike, make sure you see someone who knows and can teach you how to forefoot strike properly. There are some great tutorials on YouTube, so you can find those out. The KSO, if you're not looking at doing any heavy sport, if you're just going to be in the gym, if you want to wear them out when you're walking around, again, cheaper versions, or 70 to 80 quid, I believe. Really good shoe, tough. I think I wore one pair for a year, and it was only after about a year and a few months that it started to get a little hole. But the sole on this will wear, so I find the Komodo sole lasts for longer. This wears quite quickly in comparison to some of the other types. So be aware of that, because all this you've got to take into account depending on how much money you want to spend on them. As you can see, when I get an offer, I've normally got some money aside to buy a couple. Plus. Just so if you get into them, you may want to do the same thing. So moving on to the KSOs, because that's all there really is to say about that, other than, again, I've got a cross strap, it's got a mesh front, so it's better in temperatures that are a bit hotter, because you get some breathing. All of them are machine washable, as far as I'm aware. Every single line is. I tend to throw them in the washing machine, so if they get dirty, just chuck them in the washing machine, and they'll be good as new once you've washed them. So that's the KSO. Moving on next to one of my most recent purchases, actually, and I'm absolutely loving them, and that's the Spirodons. I'm a bit annoyed I left it so long to get them, actually. And what I've also done is I've got these in an LS version. So what you see here, this is LS, so they've got the lace system where you can pull tight on top. I'm not sure if I actually see a huge difference between laces and cross strap. I think the cross strap, if you pull it too tight, can affect the inside of your foot here a little bit more. So all I would say is be aware of the fitting when you tighten them up. You don't want them too tight. You want your foot, your midfoot, this middle part just here, if you can see where I'm pressing. You want that to be able to move. That's the whole point of wearing the shoe. So I would say, I don't know. I don't think it matters. So if you get a deal and you pay less, I don't think it matters what you buy. Some people prefer one over the other. I do quite like the lace, must say. So a couple of the ones I've got coming are a lace system. But anyway, back to the shoe. The Spirodon, it has a different kind of sole. And if I can show you here, you might see it's almost like a gripped sole, a bit like a tyre. I love the sole. I've got to say, on this one, I've been living in these outside. Gives you a really good feel underfoot, A reasonable amount of grip as well, up and down hills, because sometimes I find with the other versions you can get a bit of slipping, especially if they're worn, if you've had them for a while. So you then have to be a bit more careful with your footing, whereas I find with the Spyridons not so much. They're a good shoe to wear with socks, so if you're going to wear socks I find they're really comfortable with socks, whereas some of the others can be a bit tight. The tongue is good because they're not cross strap. I quite like the tongue, it can make them easier to get on because you can pull on the tongue a little bit. And yeah, much like the Komodo, good all-rounder, tough. Haven't hiked in it yet, so I can't tell you what hiking's like. But for all other things, walking, gym, so on, that'll be fine. Although again, I haven't worn this in the gym. I think because it's a bit bulky, I tend to go for a more minimal feel in the gym. So I can't imagine you can't use them, but it's not what I would grab, because this is more for me working, walking around, being out, everyday general use. So yeah, Spirodon's really comfy, really good shoe. You're not going to waste your money buying that one. I would guess pretty good for transitioning as well, because they've got that tough sole underneath. Right, so that's the Spyridons. Just let me get a little sip of water. Right, the next one I'm going to are the Vybrids. Now the Vybrids I've only recently started wearing because they're not generally available. I was one of 22 people to get a pair of these in the country, in UK and Ireland I believe. And the reason why, they're a tester model, and I'm a bit confused as to what they're doing here. I've been wearing them recently, I haven't worn them a lot because I was actually a bit weirded out and scared to try them on, because what I didn't realise is they have a very small heel. So if you can see there, it's not massive, it looks big, but actually when you press in it's very, very thin. We're talking probably about 1/4 inch. So there's also a tough protective point around the plantar fascia and the arch. So that might be what they're looking at. They're also a proper lace-up system, although it's an all-in-one. So if you can see here, the tongue isn't loose, it's actually part of the shoe, but are normal laces. So if I was to undo that, you'd find that they open right out. They are very comfy in the top of the shoe. I really like the material on the top. And they're actually quite warm. Surprisingly, I didn't think they were going to be that warm, but they're quite warm, and I don't know if that's to do with the material or not. The sole is a bit more like a TrekSport, and it does feel a bit more like wearing a trainer. Now, in the wet, if there's puddles, that's good, is an argument, but you don't find your toes get as wet. Because in quite a lot of the other ones, because they're so close to the floor, if there's any kind of puddles, you'll often get quite wet toes. However, today I've been wearing these around in the wet, and there's actually been no real issue. My feet haven't got wet, my socks haven't got wet, and I do think that's to do with a slight raising. But as I say, I'm at a loss as to why they're doing this. It could be maybe to limit stretch on the Achilles, but if we're walking barefoot, that should be the norm. I'm not sold on them because I'm not sure if there's a biomechanical reason behind it. The only thing I can imagine is because maybe there were some complaints about not enough protection for the heel and for people who are transitioning. So if that's the case, maybe that's why they've done it. So what I would say is this may be a good shoe for transitioning if they become available on the market. Difficult to say. I can't really tell you much more than that. I'd have to wear them a lot more. I'm not going to reach for these to train in the gym, quite frankly, because when I squat, when I lunge, when I deadlift, I want to be flat on the floor. I'd either want to be barefoot or in some minimal, like Bikilas or ELXs, to give me that complete foot control. So yeah, confused, not quite sure, not upset I bought them, but at the same time, I'll have to give you a bit more of a review on these another time. So be wary of those, but as I say, maybe if you're transitioning. Right, so if we go next one on my list are the ELXs. Now the ELXs are the cheapest model you're going to find. You might see here, really, really minimal. Really, really minimal. Now the sole, however, which is a bit like a smaller version of the Spirodon really, is actually really nice. When you put them on, it's like putting a sock on, and in the summer, it's brilliant. I also ran in Portugal. I ran for about 2 or 3 miles in these on tarmac, and my calves ached a little bit the next day, but it was actually much easier than I was expecting. Really felt good underfoot, but maybe that's because of the transitioning. Excuse me. Really nice material, really easy to get on, surprisingly easy to get on. They may wear through quickly if you're using them a lot, but I love training these. I think these are quite good for when you're doing any kind of circuits, any kind of squatting, lifting, any kind of TRX, anything like that. As long as you've transitioned, remember that key word all the time. So yeah, I really like those. These were only, I think, about £70. Some, but I actually got them in the States, so they were even cheaper than that. I think I paid about 45. So if you are pushed for cash and you just want something for in the gym, they're just as good as going barefoot. So I like these. I use them a lot. Not wasted money if you get a pair of those. But be aware, nothing like the Komodo. You'll see a huge difference in amount of shoe you've got. So understand what you're buying and why you're buying it. Right, next one. Now we go into the Lontras. Now the Lontras can create a little bit of a discussion. I don't actually know if these are available in the UK because I got these direct from Vibram, where they helped me out in this review. So thank you, Vibram. And these are, I think, about £150. These were brought out because of people complaining about not being able to wear anything in the winter because it was too cold. Here in England it gets too cold in the winter, and below, as I was saying, 4 degrees, you're really starting to have to warm your feet up. I'm mixed with these. At first I thought, no, I'm not going to like them at all. But if I wear them with socks, and I've now broken them in a little bit, I actually really like them because they do give me an option. If it's cold, I throw these on. If it's wet, I throw these on. I think the top layering here is actually quite waterproof, so I don't ever feel my feet getting wet when I'm in these. They're supposed to be good for an hour in the snow. Haven't been able to test that. I don't want to be quite honest, but they have a fleece liner. Again, if I come near again there, fleece liner here, which as soon as you put them on, you do notice the rubbing of your foot inside does actually warm up your foot. It's an interesting shoe. It's not the most fashion conscious shoe, but quite frankly, it allows me to keep going out in the winter barefoot or with spaced toes. You will find initially, if you go barefoot in these, really tough to get your little toe, or it's tough for me to get my little toe in there. So I take a while to get my toe in. However, once I'm wearing socks, it's actually quite easy as long as I pull quite hard on the tongue and get my toes in first, and get my toes into place, big toe, then pull my foot in, and then once it's in, I can get the little toe into the little toe on the shoe. Yeah, whether it's worth £150, I'm not sure. You may have better things to spend your money on, and if you get some socks and, as I say, maybe some Komodos or some Spirodons, you may be okay for a while in some cold temperatures. So if you specifically love the shoes and you decide you want an array, then definitely good for cold weather. But you have to want to part with 150 quid to be able to be good in the cold weather. So that's your call. You could always shift back into some trainers for when it's really cold, which obviously some people do. I occasionally do. I've got some Morels and things like that. But yeah, I quite like them. So don't rule them out as a shoe to buy. Moving on now, the Flow. The Flow is one of the oldest and most original. It's based on the KSO. Well, I've actually left them in my little storage thing down there. Basically, the Flow is the same as the KSO, but made of a waterproof neoprene material. They are waterproof, but you will sweat in them, especially in the summer. So The flow is an interesting one because now I've got my Lontras, I never reach for them. So I did used to wear them before I got my Lontras whenever it was mega raining, but I still felt my feet were kind of wet because they were sweating them. So I can't massively recommend the flow. I think it would be better off spending your money getting some Spirodons or some Lontras and just make sure that you're prepared to get your feet a little bit wet. Why? Because you'll get more use out of the Spirodons. You'll wear them all the time when it's dry and so on. So where you can go and see my full review of the flow if you just look further down on the page, and I did a flow review about a year and a half ago. But as I say, it's not one I'm looking at buying. You might notice here, because I don't do water sports, I haven't got I think it's called the Maori and the Signa. I think they're two of the new waterproof ones. So I haven't got a review of those because I don't do water sports and need them, and if I was, I probably wouldn't wear them. I'd probably be barefoot. But if you were going through water and rocks, that's something you might want to look at. But I can bring you a review on that. Next one's TrekSport. TrekSport is one of the oldest shoes. Again, it was a sort of progression from the KSO, but it had much more of a sole underneath to give you that protection, more protection around the toe. I didn't find these particularly comfortable in my feet. Now, it might have been because I was transitioning at the time and my big toe used to stick in awkwardly into the toe. So it's a good all-round shoe. It's tougher than a KSO. It's harder wearing. You can wear it great for road running, for hiking and so on. I have replaced these with Komodos. So I personally go for Komodos. Komodos are more expensive than a TrekSport. So again, if you're looking at funds, if you're looking at pricing, a TrekSport will do you the job. But I think the Komodo is a better shoe, and I think it's better fitting to the foot. I think the materials on it are nicer. So you can go for the TrekSport. You will be happy with your purchase, but I think you'll be more happy with a Komodo or a Spyridon. So bear that in mind. But it's the same uses as a KSO. So if you need to, pop back and see the KSO review, and that's going to be what you buy it for. The classics. I got these because when I'm on holiday, if I'm walking around and not on the beach or not walking around and it's a bit hot on the pavement or so on, I don't want to have my foot fully enclosed. So I've got my ELXs, but I've also got a pair of the old classics. These were one of the first to come out along with the Sprints. So you can see it's the old shape. It's the same sole as the KSO. They're comfy. Really enjoy wearing them. However, and I don't know if this is for everyone, but for me, on my right foot, I can't do up. If you look here, you have to pull that to tighten the shoe up. I can't pull that very tight on my right foot, because if I do, this part here digs in quite nastily, and so I just don't do them up. I just slip them on. So these effectively for me are slip-ons. So I don't really wear them anywhere other than on holiday or walking around in the summer. So if I'm walking around, going out, but not going to be doing anything other than walking around. Also, you've got to be aware that because they're quite open, sometimes stuff does get in. This was the whole reason for creating the KSO, which stands for Keep Stuff Out, and the Komodos, and this is why they built up the shoe, because stuff would go in there and you'd be constantly, like with the Sprints, you'd be constantly trying to get stuff out of your shoe, which is why these for me are a summer shoe and a holiday shoe. But with my feet getting tougher, I'm walking around barefoot more and more, so they're sort of becoming irrelevant. I just take my ELXs in case I really need something on my feet. So the classics, cheaper again, older model. You'll probably find offers on the classics, on the KSOs, on the Bikilas. You're not wasting your money. If you can get them even cheaper than trade, do it. They're a good shoe. But as I say, I've found replacements because I do think the company's moved on, and I do think they've created better shoes. And you'll see that from my previous reviews, which have pointed out how much I like some of the newer shoes. It's just good to know that they're not sitting still. However, still not sure about those Vybrids. Finally, the Seeyas. Now, I got the Seeyas before I got the Spyridons, annoyingly. I hardly wear these, and I don't know what it is. I just don't find them particularly comfortable. They're a light shoe, So if I can show you there, I don't know if you can see, the actual material is really thin. It's more like a mesh, like almost like a running top, short material. The cross strap is really flimsy. I mean, it's to the point where I just think it's going to break. So I think the underside of the shoe is, as you can see, it's quite plastic. It's not like the other shoes. It doesn't bend the same. I don't feel these give me a very good barefoot feel. Now, you'd think with them being so thin that they give you a great barefoot feel. I can't explain it. I hate wearing them. That's why they're almost brand new. I may give them another bit of time in the gym. It may be that they're really good for wearing in the gym. They maybe give you support when you're doing squats and everything. I just never reach for them because I put them on, my feet look weird. The shoe doesn't feel right. It's quite light. So I would personally put this down your list of purchases. I would have a Spirodon over this any day. I'd have a Komodo over this any day. I'd have a KSO over this any day. I'd have an ELX over this any day. So as you can see, it's not my favourite shoe, but I still think it's better than a shoe. So if someone gave me a normal shoe, and gave me these, I'd take these because I'm still then using my toes freely. So yeah, be aware. I think they're quite pricey as well. I think they're about 130. I think they're the same bracket as Komodos and Spirodons. So again, know what you want it for. I can't particularly tell you what they'd be good for because I've never found a need for putting them on. As I say, probably look more at Spirodons. So yeah, I have got Speed LS and Komodo LS, which means speed shoe with laces and Komodo with laces coming. Komodo Sports with laces. But they're not here yet, so I will redo this at another time and I'll bring those in on it as well. And any new lines that I get. We're going to take a break there, and when I come back I'm going to discuss with you which are the best for different times in my opinion, and this will be labelled as part 2. So see you soon and we'll talk more about Vibrams. Take care.